Good evening and welcome to SACAP's webinar on what you can do with the Higher Certificate Pass. My name is Jaclyn and I am the Junior Brand Manager based at the Johannesburg campus, and I will be your host for this evening. Before we proceed, there are a few house rules that I would like to bring to your attention. We will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation, so please feel free to pop us your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We are also aware that there is high internet usage in the country, thus slowing down connections in some areas. We also know that load shedding might take place any moment, and should you or any of our panelists be cut off due to this, kindly note that the recording will be made available on all our social media channels at the end of the week. Please also be advised that we are still working from home, so should you at any given point hear an occasional microwave beep, a truck driving by, or a child screaming in the background, we do apologize for that. Without wasting any further time, I'd like to take you through this evening's program. We will be sharing information on the benefits of a higher certificate by SACAP's Academic Dean, Dr. Jaclyn Lotter. And we will also be speaking into transitioning into a higher education with a higher certificate pass by counseling psychologist and SACAP educator, Clare Chester. And lastly, the head of SACAP's Durban campus, Praneetha Jugdeo, will share a bit about why she feels that SACAP's higher certificate is worth the while. Without wasting any further time, I will now hand you over to Dr. Jaclyn Lotter for more information on the benefits of studying the higher certificate program.
My name is Dr. Jaclyn Lotter. I am the Academic Dean at SACAP, and I'll be chatting to you about two particular areas regarding the higher certificate. So I'll guess what I'm going to do is I'm going to split what I'm going to speak about into two sections. The first being the changing world of work, and the second around the preparedness for 4IR, or the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I guess it's important for our matriculants and for their parents, if there are any parents with us this evening, to realize that the world of work has fundamentally shifted in the last 15 years. No longer are we going to university or college and preparing ourselves for a very particular profession, and then entering that profession and staying there for the rest of our lives. You know, maybe making one major shift along the way. I think if you think, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, our parents were going to university and they were studying banking to become bankers, and they were staying as bankers for all of their careers, or they were studying teaching to become teachers and then remain teachers for their careers. So research at the moment shows us that people will in fact make, on average, at least 5 major shifts in their career. So this is fundamental shifts from kind of one area to the next, and that within those 5 major shifts, they'll actually make 15 smaller changes along the way. So what does this mean for you as you prepare to choose a study pathway? Well, I guess it means you don't need to know where you're going to be in 15 years' time when you make the decision at 18 or 19, which should come as a huge relief to you. I think, in fact, if you speak to many adults, if you speak to your parents, they'll say to you kind of, how was I supposed to make a decision at 18 for the rest of my life? So much has changed since then. I've changed so much since then. And so at SACAP, we often see people coming to study psychology, in their 40s or their 50s. And they say this to us, I had to make a decision at 18. So what this does is it frees you up to shift your mindset to one where you should be focused on gathering specific skills, on undergoing specific experiences, on really building a portfolio as you seek to build your career. And as you build these skills, and as you build these experiences, and as you build this knowledge, you should be focusing on areas of interest and areas of passion, but with the ability to be able to pivot should you need to. So I always tell the story. I love to tell the story of one of my previous students that realized that what he had learned from a psychology degree was an understanding of what motivates people, what gets them up in the morning, and what drives their behavior. And so he took this and he applied this knowledge to athletes. And so he started to work with sportsmen and women and sports coaches around performance. So he started to really work in the area of performance enhancement. But then he realized from there that he actually had skills and knowledge in understanding what drives and motivates behavior. So he started working in an area called user experience. Now, any of you who kind of understand the tech startup world will know what user experience is about, but it would seemingly be quite a big leap from an undergrad degree in psychology. But this student was able to understand that actually the value of what he'd learned in psychology really made sense in a user experience world. So he moved across into user experience and realized that he had a love for kind of technology. And so he developed a user experience app. He makes far more money than I do now, which isn't really the point of why we choose to study what we do. But I hope you get the idea that at 18, he didn't know what he wanted to be for the rest of his life. But in gathering skills, in gathering experience, in gathering knowledge, and being able to apply those in different contexts, he's been able to build a very successful career path that looks very different to the way we'd imagined careers in the past. So if I bring this back to the higher certificate in counseling and communication skills, which is really what we're speaking about, is if you have an interest in understanding human behavior, if you are interested in the field of communications generally, if you should have an interest in counseling, in basic counseling skills, then this qualification offers you a glimpse into each of these areas. And it allows you to start to build specific skills in each of these particular areas. It also allows you to build academic literacy skills, whether these be writing skills, numerical literacy skills, or digital literacy skills. And these are all exceptionally useful skills to have if you're going to continue in higher education, if you want to continue your studies after a higher certificate, in whatever degree you choose. These are skills that are foundational to any degree within a higher education context. But these skills are also really valuable in everyday life and will add value to any career path you choose to take. So I won't belabor the point, but I guess what I'm trying to say is through this qualification, you're gathering very particular skills that can be implemented in a variety of contexts. And I think it's really important for us in higher education to help our students to understand that they start to shift and speak about the value of the knowledge and the experiences and the skills that they are gaining and how these can apply in very different roles and in very different contexts. I think we also have to start training our young people in an entrepreneurial mindset to understand how to speak about the value of the skills that they gain. To speak about the values of the skills that they have to offer a workplace. If you think about Google, Google doesn't ask you in the interview what degree you have. Google wants to understand what value you can add to their organization. So I think our young people need to start thinking differently about the way they speak about what it is they have to offer the workplace. But I think, ultimately this higher certificate is going to develop and allow you to bank a range of skills which will be useful in higher education, which will be useful in a multitude of careers, and which will just generally be useful in life. And really your responsibility comes learning how to apply these skills and learning how to speak about the value of these skills. So the second point I wanted to speak about is being prepared for the fourth industrial revolution. Now, by now, I'm sure you've heard about this at school or you've heard about this in the media, but it's definitely a term that you would have come across. But what is it, I guess, is something that you might be sitting with. I think at its most basic, it's the ability to move society forward through leveraging technology. And I guess did this not just become all of our reality last year as we were forced to move both schooling and university studies online? But I guess for me, the essence of 4IR is actually not about technology. It's about more than that. It's about identity. It's about mental elasticity. It's about complex problem solving, critical thinking, creativity, people skills, and interdisciplinary knowledge. So that sounds like a very smart thing to have said, and it was said by somebody much, much smarter than myself. But ultimately, what it's telling us is that in order to be able to not just survive, but to thrive in a modern world of work, these are some of the fundamental skills that are going to be required. So I think it was about in 2019, the World Economic Forum did some research about the top 10 skills they believe that are going to be required to be successful in the world of work in 2020 and beyond. And I just wanted to highlight some of those skills. Critical thinking, communication, emotional intelligence, and collaboration were amongst those top 10 skills. So you might be thinking, how does this relate to the higher certificate? Well, if you think about some of the core modules that make up the higher certificate, communication skills at an introductory and an advanced level are core parts of this program. You cannot undertake any qualification in the field of psychology without building a level of emotional intelligence. The ability to think critically is embedded not just in this higher certificate, but in all university level studies. And how critical is it not to have developed this skill of critical thinking in a world of information overload, where really it's upon us to be able to discern good information from bad information. And I think finally, if you think about collaboration, again, in a module like diversity, which is part of this program, you are directly addressing the ability to collaborate and work with a diverse range of people. But practically, these skills are also built into the classroom, whether that be a physical classroom or a virtual classroom, on an everyday basis. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, but I hope that I have given you something to think about in terms of the value of a qualification like the higher certificate in counselling and communication skills in terms of the new world of work, but also in preparing for the fourth industrial revolution. So I think that's it from my side, and I'll hand over to Claire, who's going to talk about something a little bit different.
Thanks very much, Dr. Lotter, and welcome to everybody tonight. What I'm going to be chatting about a little bit is sort of what the process, I'll probably do a bit more of a deep dive into what the process is in terms of transitioning into higher education using a higher certificate. But before I delve too much into that, I wanted to take a moment just to introduce myself and where I come from and what my background is. So as was mentioned earlier, my name is Clare Chester and I'm a counselling psychologist. I'm a research supervisor and educator at SACAP as well. As a psychologist, I've been practicing for 23 years. I began my career in student counselling at a large tertiary institution and then transitioned over the last 10 years into private practice. And as an educator, I've got 10 years experience working in private tertiary education and have luckily found myself in the SACAP community. particular interests of mine are ethics research, crisis and trauma counselling, but what's notable and what we're going to just chat about today is the counselling skills and my experience in working on the higher certificate modules as well as the first year module in counselling skills. Okay, so what I wanted to first sort of orientate you, and I just want to make it clear that I'm only speaking about the counselling stream in this particular segment. Praneetha will chat a little bit more about the other potential career paths and perhaps some of the other streams. But if we look at the counselling stream, in the higher certificate in term 1, students are introduced to the basic counselling skills, which is a basic introduction into counselling skills, understanding the helping relationship, understanding themselves in relation to the helping relationship, and also introduced to the concept of self-reflection and how to become a self-reflective counsellor or helper. And I think this ties into what Dr. Lotter mentioned earlier around emotional intelligence. It starts with the building of the emotional intelligence, that self-reflection, as well as key and core micro skills. In term 2, you then transition into the developing enhanced counselling skills, and this particular module is an extension on the first. So you do more. It's designed to be more enhanced counselling skills, more nuanced counselling skills, as well as more theoretical application. But cumulatively, and this is what the slide is demonstrating, is that they provide you, if you had completed both of those 2 modules, you would have transferable credits for the first year of the Bachelor of Applied Social Science, Fundamentals of the Helping Relationship module. So the fundamentals of the Helping Relationship module content is spread over these two modules in the higher certificate and paced at a slightly slower pace so that you can come to grips with some of the skills more comfortably. Okay, in the next slide, you'll see what I thought we would do is because the end result was the fundamentals of the helping relationship, we wanted to ensure that all higher certificate students would end up in the same place as students who had done the first year equivalent module. So this is the curriculum of the fundamentals of the helping relationship in the first year Bachelor of Applied Social Science degree. And I'm going to show you now how we broke it up so that you can see how the higher certificate has developed and how it is really focused on practical skills and skills development. So you will notice the Introduction to Basic Counselling Skills in term 1 focuses on the first 3 sessions of that degree course. So what's quite interesting about that is you might immediately be struck by why so few sessions. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to demonstrate for you in a moment how those are broken down into core individual skills that you could then benefit from and that are very, very practical. So taking each one of those sessions, what you will notice is in the next slide. Okay, so if you took the three core concepts which comprise the body of the higher certificate to Introduction to Basic Counselling Skills, you have Introduction to Concepts, Setting Up the Relationship, and Developing the Relationship. Now let's look at how they're broken down so that to build up that higher certificate module. So initially, they've been broken down into separating out communication and self-reflection on yourself as a helper. And what is really critical about those 2 sessions is that they're really focused on self-development and self-reflection. So there's a strong focus on inviting students to bring what they have already, your attributes, your life experience, your strengths, and to see how they fit into the helping relationship. So it's quite these two components are quite a self-reflective component where students are invited into learning more about the helping relationship, some of the challenges to it, some of the benefits of it, and also how they fit into it. The third session focuses more on now developing skills development, and it really starts with, how do you set up an office? And how to develop rapport or how to talk to in a professional way to someone, a potential client who you want to trust you. So we guide students through how to do that and give them lots of opportunities to sort of practice. If we take the second session, the setting up the relationship, here you'll notice that we're moving now to more very direct skills. So contracting, which is another kind of fancy way of saying how to ensure that any client that you would see has provided informed consent. And we also touch on ethics around sort of confidentiality and boundaries and how you would negotiate that with your clients. You then move to non-verbal attending skills, and which really looks at how we posture our body, how we make eye contact, and some of the impediments to that, and active listening skills, which is sort of making sure that you are listening to yourself as a helper, that you're listening appropriately and properly to your clients, as well as avoiding any of the barriers to listening. I just want to pause here for a moment and explain to you a little bit about how we make these practical, because it may seem quite theoretical as I'm talking about it. As you know, there are different ways that you can study at SACAP. And under normal circumstances, we have an online campus. And in an online campus, if you were on campus, what we would do is we would generally break students up into either pairs or small groups of 3. And as we go through a new skill in a session, they would then be invited to practice the skill. You would usually have a helper and a client, and so you get to play the role of both and then give each other constructive feedback. So that's how we start developing the skills. You might wonder how this works on an online space. Well, exactly the same way. We just use the breakaway session as a mechanism. So they break away and students would break away and they get to practice those skills there. So there's a really strong focus in each of these sessions on building those skills. Okay, now to the final section of the Introduction to Basic Counselling Skills. Okay, so in the last, well, it's not, this isn't the complete, all the module, all the different sessions, but the final component of developing the relationship is broken down into the verbal skills, because you will have noticed the initial core skills that we spoke of earlier were a lot to do with listening, which is obviously the first thing we want any helper to do is to be able to listen appropriately. Now we're looking at developing the relationship in terms of how do we speak, and this is usually when students get quite excited because they finally get to speak in those sessions and ask questions, which they're dying to do. So we've collapsed them into different categories. So paraphrasing, summarizing, or reflection are all quite similar, but students are guided in how and when to use each one to maximum effect so that clients will open up to them. In terms of questioning, again, a very practical application of how to phrase questions in an open-ended way so that you can get maximum information from your clients, and when to use closed questions. Working with empathy, we look at, for example, what is the difference between sympathy and empathy? And we have a class discussion around that. What do people think? How do we use empathy in the counselling relationship to maximum effect? Which all brings us to I'm going to bring you down to what the module outline looks like for the introduction to the basic counselling skills. So this is the module outline of all the different sessions that you would cover. In the first 2 sessions, which are in blue, see those in blue, as I mentioned earlier, those are quite self-reflective. So I've sort of separated those out because that's where you get the opportunity to self-reflect. It's not to say the other areas don't require self-reflection, but those are more targeted on self-reflection. The highlighted sections in purple are more skills-based and focus more on practical application and skills development. So what we've done is we've taken those first 3 sessions of the first year module, fundamentals to helping relationship, and we've kind of broken it down into its individual core components. The final 2 are really more about discursive discussion and critical thinking, and in session 10 there is some self-reflection around dealing with, for example, with diversity. Which then brings me to the term 2, developing enhanced counselling skills. So what does that look like? The first thing you'll notice when we look at it is there's a lot more content, and you might be quite struck by that. But this has been done quite deliberately. There's still a fair amount of skills development in session 4, in that session that's of the first year module. In session 4, there's a lot of skills development, but thereafter the focus is really on more content delivery. So what we do is we still break it down, we still spend a lot more attention on focusing on skills development, but we've deliberately started to increase the pace so that if you were to continue with SACAP or in any other tertiary institution, you're more familiar with the pace of a first year class, and you feel more comfortable at that pace. And with knowing you've got the background in all the micro skills and you've got all those building blocks. So if we look at the curriculum or the module outline of the Developing Enhanced Counselling Skills, the first session is really just a reorientation. Most of our students have usually had a bit of a break, and so we sort of reorientate into the skills they've learned. And then highlighted in pink, you'll see, again, new skills. And these are what we call the enhanced skills. They're the more nuanced counselling skills and the ones that are used more sparingly. So these are all valuable skills and can be used to great effect in a helping relationship, but we need to explore with students how and when to use them. So for example, something like self-disclosure, if you were doing that regularly, it would feel more like a conversation and less like a helping relationship, but used effectively can be incredibly powerful and very containing for a client. As I said before, the sessions 5 to 10 are a lot more focused on discussion on how to use the skills, how to transition them, and we do a lot of group discussion and still a fair amount of practice to keep the skills quite current. Okay, so that kind of covers the Developing Enhanced Counselling Skills. Which then brings me to transitioning into higher education and some of the assessment benefits of doing the higher certificate modules. Okay, so one of the things that has struck me is that in term 1, and as I say, I've taught on both the modules of the higher certificate as well as the first year module in counselling. In term 1, it's notable that there's a shorter word count, which means that typically in a first year module, if you were asked to submit an assignment or assessment, it would be around about 1,500 words, depending on the course. In this, it's 1,200 words, which is about a page less. So that means that there's slightly less pressure in terms of filling in the content, because we can acknowledge that students are still, as you've come out of secondary school and moving into tertiary, you're still kind of coming to grips with how to write academically in terms of from a tertiary perspective. The other important thing is that there's different mediums of assessment. So in term 1, you have one assessment, which is a written assessment, and the other is an audio assessment in which you respond with your audio, you record it and upload that for marking. The idea there is one, in a lot of counselling modules, you are required to record yourself either in role plays, for example, and things like that. And in fact, in term 2, that is one of the assessments. That might be one of the assessment requirements. So it's really easing you into that process so you feel more comfortable hearing yourself being recorded. But also for those students who have not yet mastered academic literacy, they're still kind of working on it and finding their feet, it gives them an opportunity to perhaps boost their marks. In term 2, however, you are now doing the exact same assessments as the first year students would be. So by the time you're at the end of term 2 and you've completed your Developing Enhanced Counselling Skills, you have not only covered the content, the same content as the Fundamentals of Helping Relationship, which is the first year course, you've also completed exactly the same assessments. Also, another benefit, to my mind, and having again taught on both, is that there's a really strong focus from educators on the developing students around academic literacy and certain technical aspects of academic writing, like referencing, how to frame an argument, etc. And you generally will see that in the comprehensive feedback you get. So whilst across the board at SACAP, there's always really lovely feedback, and very often it is designed to help develop you as a writer as well as explore the content. Particularly in the high certificate course, you will notice that there is comprehensive feedback around areas that you could develop your writing style. So it's really just to help you transition so that you're at the right level by the time if you want to pursue your studies, and just help you grow as an academic writer. And then lastly, there is an enormous amount of support, both not only from the educators, but we also have a wonderful student support team who are there if you want to reach out to them, but also where as educators, if we see somebody struggling, we might refer them to student support so that they could just help supplement and support their journey in the academic world. Okay. I'm almost finished, but the last little bit of wrap up is around my personal reflections. So as I said, I've taught on both the higher certificate modules as well as in the first year. And one of the things that I've most enjoyed about the higher certificate modules, both term 1 and term 2, is the pacing. I really, really enjoy the pacing. I have found that because it is a slightly slower and more practical, focused on more practical skills, it leaves a lot more space for discussion and for people to, in a way, I guess, be a little bit vulnerable in terms of, oh, I struggled with that, or I enjoyed that, and we create quite a safe environment in which those sort of that sort of sharing is really encouraged because we're learning from each other. So I really enjoy the pace of it. I've really enjoyed the fact that it's very practical and has a strong focus on skills development. And interestingly, when I chat to students, I've noticed in the past that they're always incredibly apprehensive before they get into a role play, when they have to kind of go into their pairs. And you can see them sort of grudgingly doing it, and particularly in the online space, just because it feels less natural for many people. Actually, I think that might be more my generation. I think for younger people, it feels very natural. But I generally have noticed, and students have reported, that it was, quite terrifying to begin with. But consistently, by the end of even module 1 of the higher certificate, I've had feedback from students that they have absolutely found the consistent role plays and sort of making those skills very practical and concrete, the most valuable way of learning. There's nothing like learning by doing. So I can teach you how to listen, but without actually practicing and realizing some of the barriers to listening that happen, it would be impossible to learn that skill. And I would even venture a guess to say that in some ways, by the time you've got through the higher certificate, term 2, by the time you've completed the developing enhanced counselling skills, I would say that the higher certificate students have a really built-in comfort level, because they've had so much more time, perhaps even slightly more than the first years, simply because they've had more time to sit with the skills. And so they just sort of sit more easily with them and feel more comfortable. I do like the different assessments. I can remember when I first heard about the idea of the different assessments, thinking, wow, it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. And I've just really enjoyed, the audio assessment is wonderful, because I get to hear students' voices and them speak in their own words, so which you often lose in the written assessments. And I really, many students really take to it. So that's been really nice, and I've seen how it's really aided students in terms of academic success. And then the final thing, before I wrap up, is that there's a purpose to studying this. If you are planning on staying at SACAP, one of the main purposes is that you get transferable credits to the fundamentals of the helping relationship in the first year of the Bachelor of Applied Social Science degree. So you're not doing it for nothing. You actually it has a tangible outcome. But even if you choose not to continue studying, you actually want to go out into the working world, I want you to remember that, particularly in the counselling stream, the entire model is based on what we call embedded counselling, which is embedding counselling or embedded helping, embedding it in any job. So if you think of all the different professions out there, I've had police people in the police and nurses who've done the course, more mature students, and they have spoken immensely about how beneficial it is, for example, to how to attend, because when they might be dealing with a very distressed patient, if it's a nurse or person who's been in a traumatic situation, they are better able and better equipped to handle it. People who are in management or in even customer liaison, you can see how knowing about these skills and understanding how to listen effectively, how to reflect effectively, how to respond effectively would really be a huge asset in those careers. So it has lovely vocational and lovely transferable skills. And I must say, as a psychologist, that probably one of the things I use the most in my everyday life are those micro skills that we're teaching here. So it really translates really lovely into your other world, your non-therapeutic world. So without further ado, I'm going to wrap up now. I look forward to getting or to hearing any of your questions in the Q&A. And I'm now going to hand over to Praneetha, who I think is going to chat more about the benefits of the higher certificate. So thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Good evening, everyone. My name is Praneetha Jugdeo, and I'm the head of campus at SACAP in Durban. Just a little bit about myself. So I've been in education for the past 2 decades, and I've experienced the best of two worlds, being the FET, which is the further education and training, as well as the HET, which is the higher education and training. So I'm passionate about education, as education is not just about imparting knowledge, it's also about inculcating students with career development and supporting them in achieving their life goals. SACAP has been around since 1997, who has been educating adaptive thinkers who can widely transfer skills gained, who can take control of the future, whatever the future may be. And this evening, I'm honored to speak to you on my recommendation to the highest certificate in counseling and communication skills. As we go through the next slide, Dr. Lotter has spoke to you about skills as well as the fourth industrial revolution. And Clare Chester have spoken to you more about the counseling skills in terms of what will be covered. But the slide here shows the more practical skills that one will cover in the program of the higher certificate. I'm going to start off with this writing for success. Simply, the way we write is usually the way we speak. Academically, it's incorrect. So this module develops the student academically in terms of writing and reading skills. It encourages students to find their own academic identity and to establish their own academic voice. The introduction to basic counseling skills and developing enhanced counseling skills, I'm going to link both of that together, is what Claire has already discussed. But this demonstrates more of self-reflection around the values in terms of embedment in the helping relationship and the helping process aids. The modules effective communication skills and the skills communicator. This is again the way we speak, the way we behave, the way we would send and receive messages, the way we would listen actively and passively, communicating emotionally, when it is personal or in a professional space, whether it's face-to-face or on different digital platforms. The next module I'm going to look at is understanding human behavior. This module is done where students will develop an understanding of people's behavior around them. It's usually explored with the inclusiveness of family, individual, social, and community contexts. Digital literacy for the 21st century, as Dr. Lotter spoke to you about the 4IR being the fourth industrial revolution. This is designed around 5 core competencies, being information and data literacy, communication and collaboration, digital content creation, device safety, and problem solving. Diversity in the South African context builds on awareness in which students expand their knowledge on the issues around diversity. This module covers multidimensional combination of culture, worldview, and identity, power, privilege, race, gender, sexuality, religion, and disability. The last module I will look at is numerical skills. We all need to know numbers. We all need to know how to count. But in the field or any field in terms of skills, numerical literacy is also as important as that, which this teaches us in terms of developing our reasoning skills, our number skills in terms of decision making, using budgets, financial planning, etc. So these are the modules that a student will cover for the year in the higher certificate program. But one of the questions that you would want to know is, can I get the job with the higher certificate? Which now takes me to the next slide. Is this really worthwhile in terms of job opportunities? And that's the question that everybody has in their head. And before I respond to this, I want you to note that the highest certificate in counseling and communication skills is a skills-based qualification, which means there's a lot of focus that's put into how skills are applied. There's a focus of achieving a set of goals that's required on the platform in your chosen field or chosen career. The qualifications is typically industry-oriented. You will receive the basic introduction along with the practical techniques that will help you gain entry into your chosen field. The certificate will attract employers to help you get a job, particularly if the job requires some sort of education and skills. To answer the question of job opportunities, my response is a yes and a no. Depending on the entry-level jobs you're required, needed on the field of your career or the one that you want to enter, mostly the higher certificates will give you the right start to begin your career with. Looking at your slide in terms of entry jobs, we could look at a call center agent, administrator, receptionist, starting your own business, being a blogger. Sorry. So it all depends on the entry level and exactly what skills and what requirements is needed by the employer. But now with the higher certificate, one enables to start this as a foundation. You will then be allowed to enroll for even higher education qualification, from an advanced certificate to a diploma, to the honors program, to the degree program, to masters in whichever related field that you want to go to, or any other field of studies. Be it business management, psychology, human resource management, social work, or any other field of studies, whatever your career option is, you still need the applied skills of the higher certificate. Which now takes me to your next slide, which is my personal recommendation. 2 months ago, I was asked a question at an interview, and the question is as follows. If I had to choose a qualification at SACAP, what will it be? My response was, or could have been, I could have chosen the degree, the honors, or even the master's. But I said in the interview that I will choose the highest certificate in counseling and communication skills due to the fact that wherever you go and whatever you do in one's career, one needs the basic skills to work and to apply. Right now, scenario 2020 into 2021, COVID, pandemic, the new normal, and everything at one go. Grade 12 results, release dates. Are we coping? Are we stressed? Have we received acceptance letters? What do we do? How can we help others if we can't help ourselves? What do I do if I don't get a place to study my career option at? Will I waste an entire year? I wrote for a bachelor's pass. Will I get it or not? These are the questions that's sitting on your minds, and these are the questions that you have to answer every single day until your results are released. The answer to this, and SACAP has that answer. With a higher certificate in counseling and communication, you will be able to answer these questions to yourself as well as to others. And this you would have learned with all the skills that you would have gained in the program itself. To conclude, although the world is definitely flipped upside down from 20 into 2021, you have students have rolled with the change and have kept your head high and your studies up. We know that this is not as easy, but as you enter the new, better world, a world full of opportunity for those who are bold, adaptive, and innovative. We are passionate about educating for a better world, and we are fully committed to taking SACAP to the next level of academic excellence. Let's work together to prepare you for the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much to our team for sharing that insightful information. If you have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A box below for our live Q&A session. We will now be getting into our Q&A session, and our panelists are ready to answer some of the questions that have been sent through our chat box as well as the Q&A box. I will start with the first question. It says, how is a part-time online program structured? I think this is more aligned to Clare Chester to please assist in answering that question for us.
Hi, thank you very much for that question. It's a very good one. And I invite any of my other fellow panelists to jump in if they want to add anything to what I'm going to say. The way that the part-time is different to the on-campus is so on campus you would usually do longer lectures, they're more in classroom, and a lot of the activities are embedded within them. In answer to the question that you've raised, the online program is structured slightly differently. So we have what we call synchronous and asynchronous learning, and they're big terms, but they really are to boil down to two different things. On the synchronous learning is really the content delivery. So we do it through Zoom on webinars, and it's where a lot of classroom discussion takes place. It's where you might do, for example, I was talking about practical skills in breakaway sessions where students might do a lot of practical sessions and practice things. But there is some content delivery just to ensure that, but it's ideally a space for students to come together along with their educator and to try and learn this new skill or new area. The asynchronous learning is what happens both before and after that. So before asynchronous learning, ideally we ask that all students read all the reading material so that they come to that webinar prepared and ready to go, and then thereafter and so that they're already familiar with the content already. So to minimize the need of delivering too much content in those webinars. And also the educators will also pose, for example, questions. It might be asking students to record some videos or anything else, whatever is pertinent to apply what they learned that week. So for example, you might pose a particular forum debate where everybody gets to kind of have a discussion around how a particular, how does something like body posture, how is that affected by diversity? Maybe, we in some way try and apply it and make it kind of quite relevant and extend your understanding in that process. So it is quite important to remember, if you are studying online, there's a lot of independent learning that takes place, and because the webinars are shorter, they're 90 minutes, and just simply because otherwise it gets to be quite exhausting and there's no breaks. So they're usually between an hour and 90 minutes, and as such, they're quite tailored and focused around discussion. I hope that answers your question, but as I say, I invite my panelists to jump in and add to that.
But maybe just to say, in terms of what part-time means, is that it's exactly the same program, it's simply slowed down. So the modules follow in exactly the same sequence. You would just be doing less modules per term. So instead of doing 3 modules per term, you'll be doing 2 modules per term. So that gives you a little bit more space to slow down your studies if you should be, working or have other commitments. So it just allows you to do the qualification over 2 years rather than 1 year. So just a little something to add on to what Claire has said.
This one is for Praneetha, and the question is, what NQF level is this higher certificate?
Highest certificate is on the NQF level 5.
I also have just 2 questions that have also come through. The first one reads, after completing a higher certificate, is it possible to study a Bachelor of Applied Social Science part-time and online? And the second one is, if yes to the first question, is it possible to work with children with a Bachelor of Applied Social Science qualification? Dr. Jaclyn, this is more in your area of speciality, to just clarify a little bit on those 2 questions that have been posed.
Yeah, very happy to answer that question. I think it was Hildebrand that posed that question to us. So after completing the higher certificate, is it possible to do the BAPSOC-SCI or the Bachelor of Applied Social Sciences part-time and online? Yes, absolutely. So what the higher certificate does is it actually gives you particular credits that can be carried over into the first year of our Bachelor of Applied Social Sciences degree. So it allows you to then continue that, and you can choose to continue the BAPSOC-SCI online, on campus, full-time, part-time. That's your discretion to make that decision. And then I think there was a second part to that question, is does the BAPSOC-SCI allow you to work with children? I guess it depends on what kind of context you're wanting to work with children. Can you work with children in particular ways? Certainly it's going to build skills that would benefit anybody working with children in a variety of contexts. I guess it just depends how you want to work with children. If you're asking, does it allow you to work with children as a qualified and registered psychologist, that's a different question.
We have 2 more questions that have come through. This one says, would this higher certificate be the first step to becoming a neuropsychologist? And how far would I be able to study at the college in terms of NQF level before I can get registered as a professional at the South African Health Professions Board? Dr. Jaclyn, can you please again assist us? Seems like I'm going to be having you here for a while.
It could be the first step. It depends on the route that you want to take in order to study towards this field. If you had a bachelor's pass, you could start with the Bachelor of Applied Social Science directly. You don't need to take the higher certificate as your route towards that. But if you don't have a bachelor's pass, then it would make sense for you to start with a higher certificate and build your way up towards a degree. In terms of the NQF that you can study at SACAP, so what you're asking for is the NQF that you could study for at SACAP is an NQF level 8, so an honours level degree or an honours equivalent degree. We do offer an NQF level 9 master's program, but that is not a master's program that is registered with the Health Professions Council of South Africa. That is a master's in community mental health promotion and sits in our faculty of social work and community development. So if you wanted to go on into the space of neuropsychology, you could complete an honours level degree with us, or your BPsych or your BPsych equivalent, which are all NQF level 8s. And then generally in South Africa, because neuropsychology is a little bit of a difficult and contested space at this stage, in terms of who's offering qualifications towards neuropsychology, which universities, and how you register with the HPCSA. But generally at this stage, most people who work as neuropsychologists have gone on and done a clinical master's program. So that's at your NQF level 9. And then they've created a specialization for themselves within the neuropsychology space. So I hope that answered that question. Claire, I'm not sure if you want to add anything else or if you feel I've captured that space there.
I think you've done a wonderful job, Jaclyn.
Okay.
Yeah, you captured it perfectly. Thanks.
All right.
There's another one that just popped through and it says, does the program accommodate full-time working employees as far up to honours level? Dr. Jaclyn, can you please also assist with that one for us, please?
So, Cody, yes. At honours level, you have 2 options. If you're talking about the academic honours, you have our on-campus honours, which is a full-time program. And then you have our online honours, which is a part-time program. So generally what we find is that our working professionals choose to do the academic honours online because it gives them the opportunity to slow the program down. It's exactly the same program. You come out with exactly the same qualification, the same outcomes are taught across on campus and online. But generally, our working people do the part-time honours online. On campus is full-time. And so in that regard, the program is quite demanding and it would be quite tough to be working at the same time. So my recommendation would certainly be the online option. Of course, at an honours level, we also have the BPsych equivalent program, which is something for you to also maybe look into a little bit. But this is an 18-month program, and this is a full-time program on our campuses, but just something for you to also potentially consider. So I hope that answers your question, Cody.
We have come to the end of our live Q&A session, but if we did not answer any of your questions or if you'd like our team to contact you, please leave your email address and query in the chat box and our admissions team will be in contact with you. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, and we certainly hope that we have made your decision to study with us a little bit easier. We would like to personally invite you to our online open day tomorrow to find out more about SACAP's full range of courses as well as our study options. Kindly note that you will automatically be registered, so you will have the link should you choose to join us tomorrow evening. Remember to also leave your email address in the chat box and our admissions team will get in touch with you for more information. We will also make the session available on our social media platforms in case you have missed a few points and would like to recap on what was shared with you guys. Thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and we would like to wish you a great evening further.